Let's do this. So we're going to do something a little bit different today, right?
Yes.
Today it's just going to be me. We had to move a duo discussion to next week. Yeah, you ready to get this going?
Yeah.
Get this going?
Let's go.
All right, let's get this thing started. All right, hello folks. My name is Andrei. I am the CEO and co-founder of Seldon Digital. This is the Seldon Plan, and today we're going to do a deep dive into a discussion about augmentation versus automation in AI. My co-host David Nada is not with us today, and so we just decided to take a solo test of this, although my partner in crime here is Micho. Micho has usually been behind the camera, but this time he's going to be in front of the camera. So how are you doing, Micho?
Yeah, I'm good. It's a bit out of my comfort zone, but I guess that's good.
All right, let's get this started, man. What do we want to do today?
So today we're digging into a topic that every designer is talking about, AI augmentation versus automation. So this last year I've been exploring tools like Framer, Figma, Webflow, and Lovable. I want to know what really makes one tool feel like a co-pilot instead of another black box button presser tool. So Andrei, let us start by defining our terms. What do you mean by augmentation versus automation in design?
So what do I mean by augmentation versus automation? So generally speaking, I think you can think of this in a similar fashion that you think of general machinery. So for example, for all of human history, as we've made machines, machines kind of have lots of different styles and approaches, but generally speaking, they do one of two things. They either automate a process or they augment the process. The augmentation is more like levies and pulls systems. So back in the day when they were trying to hoist up bricks or hoist up wood on top of houses and things like that, they would have to do it by a rope and pull, and you have to hold the whole weight. When they started developing levies and gear wheels and all these other kinds of systems and pulleys, they discovered that they can offload the weight balance through the gears and kind of do the rotations and whatnot. That made pulling with the rope significantly easier. That is augmentation. So when machines do that, they augment. Automation is when something is literally self-running. So it's a machine that is self-running. Now, there are also kinds of automations out there. So like in a car, for example, automatic transmissions. That is, the car itself is not self-running, although that's becoming more possible these days. But the transmission used to be manual, where you as the driver had to use your 2 feet to push in the gear, let off the gas, use the handle, use your hands to switch the gears. Automatic transmission does all that for you. And so automatic means that you can just press the gas and it handles itself. So those are the definitions we're going to go with. Augmentation is when a machine, and AI is a form of machine, if you will. It's a digital machine. But augmentation is when a system is built to help you with a task or a process that you have to accomplish. Automation is when it does it for you, and you, the human, can skip it, but it's still being done by the machine. Augmentation in design is when the machine or the AI helps you achieve a result, and you don't have to do all the heavy lifting yourself. So what does that look like? Let's say you're building an app, and the app has a flow going from A to B to C. And in step B, different customer profiles occur. So let's say your app is designed for musicians. And so step B is designed to show people who are into jazz something. And if you're into rock music, step B shows you something different. In step B, if you're a metal or a heavy metal guy or person, it shows you something different. So step B is the thing that switches between the flow of A to B to C. Augmentation is when the machine or the AI helps you understand and how to figure out what to put there and what to switch there. It doesn't do it for you, but it helps you find solutions that would be appropriate at step B based on the 3 different profiles I just mentioned. That would be a kind of augmentation. So in that sense, you would have the AI helping you with the audience to find different contextual ways of presenting the data or presenting the feature. Either the flow, it has a certain feel. There's a certain aesthetic depending on these things as well too. So that would be kind of an augmentation approach. So in the tools, what that looks like is basically the AI helps you take the same step or the same thing in step B and create 3 variations based on those profiles. And then you get to choose that. Now, without that, you have to do them yourself. And there's a lot of complicated steps to build out the result based on those profiles. You can use the human do it, but it's just a lot of tedium. There's a lot of tedium in like, oh, I got to switch these colors, or I got to switch the content, or I have to do the flow slightly differently because the music's going to be different, or any number of things that might come up in step B. Automation says, you know what? I don't care. Just do it for me. In the past, automated design was a lot of people wanting to have filters in Photoshop, for example, and they just wanted to press a button and say, make this beautiful. And I find that rather dystopian. I don't think that's a very useful way of doing automation. What automation should be is, look, now that I've got these designs, write the code for me. Or now that I've got these designs, switch out the variables that I need that will make this work for me, rather than me having to do it. So augmentation in this case would help you find the results. Automation would help you produce the results, is the way I would think of it.
Okay. Many tools race to add AI features like text generation, image fills, one-click layouts. So what do you think the end goal is for these companies?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks right now, and even now just Google releasing its own kind of lovable competitor, or Figma Make competitor, I tend to find this is the same thing that's happened before. So when the internet was first coming around, or when digital cameras came around, or when mobile computing came around, or when social media came around, a lot of folks race to implement features in the hopes of capturing audiences and then figuring out what to do with it later. And that's one way to do it. But I tend to find that is, it produces very temporal results that aren't very long lasting, and it doesn't really solve problems. So what I think is happening right now is that people are enamored with this idea of AI or a machine writing code. So regardless of what the purpose of what they're trying to do, writing code actually does something, and it looks magical to folks. So I think a lot of these folks are writing code, but they aren't solving the actual problem, which is designers and engineers and the product team are trying to build something. So by having the AI write code, they're just trying to capture audiences, and then they'll solve the actual problems later. And I tend to find that what they want to do is they want to make augmented AI tools. They want to make AI tools that are augmenting the designer or the human being in this case by letting them prompt their way to a result. What they're making is more of an automation tool where they're trying to make the writing of code done by the machine. And I think they're missing the mark on both ways. I think they're missing the mark both ways because they're focusing on a problem that doesn't need a solution in the way that they're doing it. And what I mean by that is that you don't really need AI to write front-end code, because front-end code is kind of a known problem. It has a known set of solutions in that sense. And they're missing what they could be doing, what they're trying to do by augmenting designers and how they make choices and figure out the process and stuff like that. So I think they're missing it on both marks, personally. We'll see if that plays out.
And where do today's tools fall on the augmentation to automation spectrum?
That's a good question. Where do the tools fall on the spectrum? So, like I said, I think Figma, Make, and Lovable are falling too far on the automation side. They're trying to do the augmentation side, and they can only really do that if they're only to be aiming to be a prototyping tool, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that per se. I just don't think that that's a very interesting thing to solve. I think they want to be more on the augmentation side. I think it's too early to call that right now. I think a lot of AI, because of the nature of what people are seeing, and people tend to follow leaders in terms of how fast they're building things, they're all building things with these new approaches that are all about automation. At least that's what's happening. It's trying to be about automation. They're trying to automate away code writing, or they're trying to automate away the designer. People are seeing these tools as a way to remove positions and roles, and I don't think that that's very useful. I think if you create your tools and processes properly, you'll know, do you need these people, and then you can remove them. Not that you should just remove them because the AI is going to replace that. How many people do you actually need when you create tools that augment humans? So before, it might, like in my earlier example, it might have taken you 10 people to pull up a very big pile of wood or stones with the old systems back in the day when you're building a house. With the right levers and pulleys, maybe it takes you 1 or 2 people because the levers and pulleys allow you to offset the weight properly. Well, that's how you figure that out. You figure out the solution for augmentation, and then you let the rest of it work itself out. But if you said, I'm going to make these things so I don't need any human beings to pull this up, well, you can do that now in modern days, but as a step process going forward, it probably doesn't tend to lend you to good solutions, because the solution out of the gate is probably going to be over-engineered by trying to be completely automated.
So Figma is slowly shifting from a prototyping tool to a production tool. So how might Figma sites move towards the direction of augmentation?
It's a good question. So that actually is a very good point. Framer, I definitely tend to think of more as an augmentation tool. It does a lot of the components for you, but you control the design, you can control the properties and the pieces more your fashion. I don't know. I don't tend to think that Figma, I think Figma, a lot of people point this out, I think Figma is just going after everything. I don't even think that, I think they want to be the new Adobe with multiple tools and multiple products and a product line per se, not just one product, because they need multiple products. And to do so, they basically went after every single competitor that they have. They went after Framer, they're going after Webflow, they went after Lovable, they're going after Google Slides or Pitch or any number of other products that have been around for this. And I guess we'll see if it works. I tend to feel like they're spreading themselves thin across everything, and that may work. And we'll see, but I don't know if they're really thinking about automation versus augmentation. I think they think of themselves purely as an augmentation tool set across the board. They're there to help designers build better things. But how they use AI in that regard isn't clear to me, to be honest with you, to answer that question. I don't see what they're doing as to be either automation or augmentation per se. I think they're just building tools for designers and they'll see where the chips fall. But who knows? We'll see how it develops over time.
So in earlier episodes, you've said that AI can free us from the tedious 10% of design work. So in your opinion, which repetitive pixel pushing tasks should AI handle first?
Yeah, that's a pretty straightforward one. So the easy answer to that is all the tasks that require batch processing or multiple changes across an entire system. So for whatever reason, let's say you've done your design system or you built something out and all your buttons are squared off in blue. And then somebody comes along and they want to rebrand the company, and the rebranding requires that all the buttons be light fuchsia and rounded. So, having to go through all your systems and files and make those changes. If you built variants properly or components properly or any of the number of things properly in the old apps, you could do it sort of. But even still, a lot of people break the components and they apply overrides in different ways and all kinds of crazy things. So in the product we're making in Seldon, you just say, make all the buttons light fuchsia and rounded. And then Seldon goes through the entire system at the core and fixes and adjusts everything for you. So you don't have to do that kind of thing. So automation, I think from AI points of view, are going to be the easiest to solve batch processing and large changes across a system. Outside of that, it helps a lot with FPO content, like for placement only content, whether that be text or textual descriptions or even images. So stuff that you can actually put into things to get a sense of what the design is going to do and not have it be final, but get some reality to it. Outside of that, then the question then becomes helping people. I think the last bit is when you're pixel pushing, you're generally having to build things from scratch or build things from other systems, and a lot of little mistakes are made in that regard. But if you have an AI build the component for you, or a combination of the properties and the components that you request based on either a sketch or dropping in a PDF, the chances of those mistakes goes way down. And so all that kind of tedium goes away. So it's going to be a lot of tasks probably along those three axes.
So you've also said that AI often overlooks the nuances of creative problem solving. Where do you think that the pure animation misses critical design subtleties that augmentation does preserve?
So this is going to be, I'll try to describe it this way and see if this makes any sense. You tell me if this makes any sense. Basically, when computer graphics came around, especially like Pixar, like let's say take Toy Story back in the 90s, or Ants or any other animated movie. When computer graphics came out, there was a notion of surrealism that was because the computer graphics themselves were too clean. They were actually too good. They were almost too perfect. And it lost a little bit of that human feel. So I tend to think that's going to happen the same thing here. At first, the AI is going to be too good at building things, quote unquote, correctly. And by doing it correctly, it's going to be so perfect that it's going to have like an inauthentic feel to some degree. So I think that's probably going to be where this happens first, is that it'll be too clean and too perfect. And a lot of the creative problem solving that you want to do is either in an exception or an edge case or in this kind of imperfect or slightly human feel of something. So once we get past through that one stage, we need the AI then to help us kind of bring back the human authenticity, if you will. And I tend to think that's what's going to be, that's where we're going to get real interesting things happening. But the automation part out of the gate is going to make things almost too good. It'll up-level things so high that it's going to feel a little odd out of the gate, I think. There's also this study that was done a long time ago about pets and things like this. This was done in the United States. I don't know if it's relevant in cultures outside the US. But they did this study where somebody lost their dog or their cat. The cat's missing. So they made a poster. Or they have a for sale, I'm selling this piece of furniture. The study was a bunch of designers lost their cat. And so what the designers did is they went out and they made like these fancy posters with like really good type and like everything's like printed and laser printed. All of this stuff is like feels really, really good. And then they had people, just normal people, make the missing, cat signs. And they were handwritten with a handwritten number, handwritten name, a little bit of a Xeroxy blotchy photo of the cat, etc. People responded to them better because it's like, oh, this person's cat is missing because it's in their own handwriting. When people were presented with typeset and all these professionally designed things, it was like they were being sold a marketing ad or something like that. So that's kind of like what I mean by the cleanliness versus the humanity. Like AI is going to make things so perfect right out of the gate that we're going to have to quickly figure out how to help it find that humanity back. And I don't know, we'll see. I think it's definitely possible. Obviously, we wouldn't be doing this, but that's going to be one of the challenges to overcome in the very near future.
So there's a lot of hype around single prompt generation, like vibe coding tools. Tools like Lovable feel like full automation to me. You have to keep adjusting your prompt and it's purely textual, but you have to make changes to a visual canvas. So how do you see this one-shot approach working out at the end?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, if I'll say something controversial, anytime you need a a short-lived term to define a feature or a thing, you're probably already lost. What I mean by that is the term vibe coding already has lost me just because it's a fad. It immediately turns into a fad, which means it's a trend, which means that it probably isn't going to last a long time. So things that last a long time don't need marketing speak, for lack of a better way of saying that. It also kind of cheapens what people are trying to do. I think that just turns the whole thing into a bad vibe. Is that a bad dad joke? It's probably a bad dad joke. Yeah. So basically, the notion of prompt engineering or prompting things, to me, loses the plot to some degree. Now, right now we do it because basically LLMs pattern match language super amazingly well. So the best way to then get results out of it is just to have it pattern match your language, and then the results then also pattern match from the training data what it can spit out effectively. So in one case, if you say, give me a summary of Shakespeare's Othello, it'll write a paragraph of text. In the other case, you say, write me a table with these kinds of things, it'll write the code, because the code is kind of a language in this word. And it's actually really not coding per se. It's mostly like HTML plus CSS, which is kind of a scripting language effectively. The problem with vibe coding and the problem with prompt engineering, I'm going to relate a story I've told people before, I think. There's a designer who I've always looked up to. Paul Rand is one of my design heroes. But another one is a gentleman named Edward Tufte. And Tufte is a professor of data visualizations and analytics and information design and things like this at a high level, and teaches at Yale. Tufte had a really good paper he wrote. It was kind of like a short chapter of a book almost, called The Cognitive Psychology of PowerPoint. If you've not read this, everybody should read this. Because of that paper, he wrote it in the 90s or in the late 80s. I forget when he wrote it. I think it was in the 90s. Because of this paper, he became known as the PowerPoint sucks dude, basically. Everybody kind of interpreted his take on PowerPoint and slide software and things like that as Tufte hates PowerPoint. And while he does not like PowerPoint, it's pretty clear. I've seen him give speaks and I've seen him give lectures and talks to this point. That's not his overarching point. His overarching point is actually that the tool itself changes how the brain works, because the way the tool works shapes the information that's being presented, and therefore the human being thinks in those terms. So what's really happening with PowerPoint is not that it's a bad software tool. I mean, as software goes, it's actually pretty good software. And same with Google Slides. It's decent software. It's not spectacular. There are a lot of people who think Keynote's the best, and I personally think that Keynote's okay, but it's not the best thing ever. The larger point, though, is by using slide software, you think in terms of bullet points and blocks of rectangles of slides as a presentation. And then as a business owner, you start thinking in these terms versus what's the narrative going on. So if you're describing like your product problems and your manufacturing problems, you should think of the way you need to tell the story and the narrative of that, and then shape the slides or the things you're presenting to the data and the story you're trying to tell. But by going into PowerPoint, the other things, you're doing everything in bullets. And that changes the way you think, and then therefore it changes the way business operates, because all the upper level folks are using PowerPoint. They're thinking in bullet terms, and they're not thinking in terms of long-term tactical or strategical ways of doing things. That was his large point about the cognitive psychology of PowerPoint. Prompt engineering is doing the same thing. Prompt engineering is, and prompt interfaces like a Lovable or a Figma make, they turn the problem into a way you have to think in order to get the problem solved. So as a designer, you have to think in terms of how to write something such that in a linear fashion to some degree, even though you can kind of do it a little bit, choose your own adventure style, but you have to kind of write these things in a way that then creates a result. Like everything you type has to create a result. And this forces you to think a certain way about how you're trying to get the result and not necessarily how you're trying to understand the problem. So you become somebody in the vibe coding sense, you become to think of, it's like if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. It's that problem. And so when you do the vibe coding thing, you start to have to think in terms of how to get the prompt to be the thing that gets the result you're looking for. And that's how whether you like it or not, you start to think like that. And I think that's the problem. So vibe coding loses in that regard. Is it bad necessarily? No, I don't think PowerPoint's bad. But if you're not recognizing that you're doing that or you're thinking like that, then it can be a problem. So you don't have to use PowerPoint by using the bullets. You can actually just use PowerPoint like you used the old transparency projectors back in the 50s and 60s. You design your story and you just put it on a slide and then you show it. And in fact, a lot of the really good presentations that you see coming from people who do presentations treat PowerPoint like that. They don't treat PowerPoint like I'm going to use their templates and their bullets and structure things the way that PowerPoint wants me to. So if you're using vibe coding where you're hitting if you're doing vibe coding where you're hitting certain spots or you're like targeting little pieces, sure, it can definitely work. But if you're not cognizant of how you're using it, you might inadvertently go down a path where you think like that, and then everything looks like a nail, and the vibe coding is the hammer. That's the danger, in my opinion.
Let's talk about Seldon for a change. So how does Seldon help teams explore the problem space and capture the intent of the designer?
Right. So the way we're doing it is we've built a tool where the AI is a service. And as a service, you can inject it or use it whenever you feel like. So the entire interface in the UI that we're building right now is not centered on the prompting part. We have a chat window that you can use. So the way we're doing it is that we're doing it this way so that we can figure out when somebody needs to prompt something versus when somebody wants to sketch something and have the AI process that versus when they just want to just do things manually, or when they want to do things manually and then have the AI batch process the major changes. So we've built it in a way that's more random access, and the vibe coding part is really more of we're giving them point places to attack the problem. On top of it, we're not attacking or we're not trying to solve how does AI write code, or more specifically, how does AI write front end code. Like I said before, that's pretty much a known solution, and it's not super difficult. And I think when people start playing with Seldon and seeing how our code export looks and works in GitHub and all this other stuff, they'll start to see that. That'll become more clear at that stage. By not having the AI focus on the code and not having the interface be so heavily oriented towards generating the code, we intend to use AI for the augmentation stuff. So this is how it gets back to the beginning. It's like I want to figure out how AI can augment the human being. How do we build AI to be those pulleys and levers, not how do we build the thing that replaces the human? Let's map out how we see Seldon helping teams and solving these kinds of problems that we're looking at. So the first is because we're not using AI to vibe code or to write production code, we are focusing on how we can augment people. When you look at a team of people making something, everybody kind of brings something new to the table. So let's say you on a Monday, you get everybody in a room, like you're going to do a Google sprint, or you're going to do some kind of sprint process for the week to kind of get everybody on board on the team, on the same page, exploring the problem space, kind of getting a sense of what they can do and what they don't want to do, or how they can do it. So let's put, 6 people in the room. So we'll put one engineer, one designer, one product owner or product manager. Let's put a content manager, a researcher, and either a sales support, a sales exec type of person, or the marketing. In fact, you can put both of them in there. Now, when you put them in a room, they're all going to generate output. Now, because of the way people work, some people will want to be on computers and taking notes, and some won't. Generally speaking, though, what they're doing is they're all generating output of ideas. And when you look at a conference room, there's going to be a couple of different tools that they can employ. They can employ Post-it notes. They can employ a whiteboard. They can employ notebooks and pencils and pen. They can use their computer with certain tools. But because they're working together, they should or tend to need tools that work cohesively together as a team and collaboratively. Oftentimes that results in Post-it notes, whiteboards, and just like Google Doc notes or things like that. So in that meeting, as people are sharing all these ideas, they've got their voices. Voices could be recorded as well too. You got a designer, maybe they have a pen, they can sketch, etc. What is happening in that room is a lot of intent. We say human intent. They're trying to solve a problem collaboratively and together, but they want to do something in certain ways. Where we're focusing our guns is how to capture their intent and how to process their intent and turn those into components. And then those components get pushed into a product as code. So what does that mean? Well, that means the researcher may have data in a spreadsheet somewhere that they need to use, or they'd like to use as part of the context. You have the salesperson who wants to use user stories or videos from in the field that they've captured of folks trying to use the product. You have, let's say, the designer who wants to sketch out and make things so systemic so that it follows the brand as well as can be reusable and effective. The product person is going to want to deal with ROI and making sure that they're not just making something that is, while it's pretty, is not functionally useful and not able to make money. And the engineers, and they're like, they need to ship this stuff, and they don't want crappy code, or they want crappy inputs that they have to then manage and maintain over time. There's all of these concerns going on. What we're doing with Seldon and our AI is we are attacking that problem. That's the problem we're looking to attack. And so in that regard, we started off with things like sketches. So sketches are something like designers like to use, but we're processing the sketching intent so that we can turn those into components. The other tools we're working on, but they're all different ways of using AI to process human intent. That's what I mean by augmentation, and that's where I see this going. So once you have everybody in the room collaborating, and then day over day, there's Monday, then there's Tuesday, there's Wednesday. As they go through the week, they should be able to build and iterate on these things in random access. They shouldn't have to necessarily do things in a linear fashion or in silos, more importantly. Right now, the other thing that prompt engineering tends to do, in my opinion, that's also not quite good, is it tends to silo folks into I'm the solo flying. Only one person can fly this plane. It's going to be me. It's like, that's not necessarily a good thing either when you want to get to these kinds of systems.
So in a fully AI augmented design landscape, how do teams shift dynamically, and how is individual style protected? Well,
you make it so that the tool can be used by everybody, accessed by everybody, and used at the same time by everybody. So we have the Seldon editor right now, which is a multiplayer editor, just like most editors these days. But we also have other touch points, integration points. So we can actually make this. So for example, we can make an iPad sketching tool for Seldon that a designer can use to sketch, and then the sketches get converted to components automatically and goes right into the project. Same for researchers. They may want to just drop their research data into a funnel that then gets processed in components that goes into the system. But if you get the people in a meeting and they're all in a meeting, you can have a computer with a TV that's running the results on it, but you can also have everybody on the computer plus everybody on their own systems, either analog or digital. And so, basically you start off on a Monday, you get people together. As you go through the week, people can see the results iteratively. They can change things iteratively. So by the time they get to a Friday, they not only can have a prototype, but because everything they've been doing has been parsed and augmented collaboratively in real time, and as a team, they can then produce a result that actually the engineer who was in the meeting can actually own and effectively continue on with it. So that's how I see the world going. I don't see the world going in single shot silos, vibe coding people who are the masters of the universe controlling everything. And I also don't see the world going to a place where the AI just does everything for us. That world, I just find, I haven't seen technology yet ever do that, no matter how much a lot of people at the beginning thought it would. Everything from farming tractors to automobiles to even the computer itself. When the computer first came around, everybody thought, well, the computer's going to do everything. I don't have to do anything at all. And that just never happened. So yeah, I mean, agents are going to be a thing. There'll be a lot more automation. There's going to be all these sorts of things. But then that just means that we get to evolve to more powerful systems because we now have more context, more content, and more data to work with because these AI systems allow us to cut through so many possibilities significantly faster than we can do on our own. In the same way that, one person or two people can pull up a really heavy set load of stones to the top of a building, whereas with pulleys and levers that they couldn't before. This has happened through human history continuously.
For younger designers, which skills will matter the most in these new dynamic teams?
At the end of the day, the best part about being a designer, the best part about being a creator, the best part about doing anything in this nation, in this this kind of space, is you get to make a decision and you get to own that decision. So if you let the AI make the decision for you, you lose that. So you have to own the decision. Is the AI suggestion any good? If it's not, you can make it better. But you still have to make the decision. And if you offload your decision to somebody else, then why are you getting paid? You should want to own the decisions. You should want to make the decisions. You should not let the machine do everything for you unless it's the tedium of something that you actually don't want to own, like switching all the buttons from squared blue to light fuchsia and rounded. Like that kind of thing I can let the machine own. But the decision about why it went to light fuchsia and rounded, that should be on you. That should not be on the machine. So if you just start letting the AI do whatever it wants to, and you just submit that without having checked it or without having approved it or without having done any investigation into it whatsoever, that's on you. That's not on the AI. So you gain the trust by providing people with good results, period. So if you trust the AI to provide good results and you submit them to somebody else and those results aren't good, that's on you. That's not on the AI. So to the point, I think you asked me this question here is like, when a designer asks, why should I trust an AI suggestion? The answer to that is very simply, you shouldn't, period. No qualifications. Don't ever do that, period. Final stop. We'll see how this goes. You'll be first time in front of the camera for you, make you feel how I feel now, which is kind of like, ugh. But we'll see if this works. So if this kind of thing works, every now and then we'll do solos. We're going to bring more people in, having discussions. We'll probably have like our CTO or our AI lead, Lior or Emil, in on these discussions as well, so it doesn't have to always be me. And if you have any thoughts, concerns, suggestions, ideas, and you want to let us know, please add some comments or pass along some messages to us via the proper channels. And we'll always be reading them, taking a look at them. So yeah, for Macho, say goodbye, Macho.
All right, thanks for listening, and see you guys next time in front of the camera or behind the camera. We'll see.
Fine a dag. Fine a dag. Till next time, this has been the Seldon Plan. I'm Andrei, and thanks for your time.